Analyzing the risk of an alternative investment can be very tricky. Unlike the stock market that has a given price every single day, illiquid alternative investments often have ambiguity in their pricing system. Luckily for us, there's a formula that exists that allows us to calculate the given risk of any investment, and I'm going to walk you through that formula today. I'm going to give an example using this formula, and then we're going to walk through how to calculate a risk to reward ratio for any investment. Value at risk is a method that we use to evaluate what are the probabilities of the amount of money I'm going to lose given the history of the asset or the investment manager's returns. This would look like there's a 95% chance I don't lose over $25,000 over 5 years in this investment. Sounds pretty good, right? Luckily for us, the value at risk formula already calculates this for us. This formula is going to be broken down into all of our Greek letters here. So this seems confusing at first, but if you can add, subtract, and multiply, this is going to be very easy. So let's walk through the formula. First, we have this funny looking U here. This is the Greek symbol for the average mean return. This is the average return of our investment. We're going to multiply the average return by the time that we plan on being invested. So this time can be represented in years, days, months, the interval that we plan on being invested. And then we're going to subtract that from Z, what's known as our Z-score. Now, if you're not familiar with Z-score, this is a concept that comes from a standard distribution probability table. And this can be done in intervals of 99%, 95%. Any given probability can be assigned to a Z-score. And then we're going to multiply our given Z-score by this funny looking O here. That's the standard deviation times the square root of time. So we have our mean returns multiplied by our time invested, subtracted by our Z-score, multiplied by our standard deviation times the square root of our time invested. So let's walk through an example of what this would look like when we're looking at a private market investment and how we can translate this formula into actionable steps for clients. Let's say you have client X that brings you a real estate investment, and we want to see how can we calculate and measure the probabilities of loss and the total risk of an investment like this. So the first thing we want to start off with is we want to find the average return of the asset manager or the asset. Now, in the private markets, this information isn't always readily available for us to calculate the average returns over a span of time. So one thing we can do is we can look at the JP Morgan Guide to Markets. There's this quote page here that gives us the past returns for each alternative asset class. Now, keep in mind your results may vary because this looks at the total asset class. And in this situation, if we're investing in real estate, your geographic location, your investment manager, there's a multitude of different situations that play a factor, but this is a good place for us to start. And if you need to download the JP Morgan Guide to Alternatives, click the link below. You'll have to make an account with JP Morgan, but this is a free guide that gives you information all about alternative investments. So next, we're going to look at our time interval. Our time interval is going to be given in years. We can calculate our standard deviation using the standard deviation formula in Excel or a calculator. So when we plug in these numbers, and in this example, we're going to say client X wants to invest $100,000. We're going to set our Z-score to 1.65. This gives us our 95% confidence level. So this calculation is going to tell us that 95% of the time, you will not lose more than X amount of money. Keyword here, 95% of the time. We still have the 5% black swan situations that we can't account for because there's an unlimited number of possible outcomes in an investment. Anything can happen. This is telling us that there's a 5% chance that I'm going to lose $21,550. Said another way, there is a 95% chance that I won't lose this amount of money. Now, if we look at the bottom side on the positive end of the bell curve, we see that the numbers go positive. So we see here 10,000. This is our average expected annual return. And with value at risk, we're focused on the negative outcomes. 50% of the time, the mean, you can lose up to 10%. Let's say we put this time interval to 5. When we switch the time interval to 5, what you'll notice is that the probability of loss increases substantially. This makes sense because over a longer period of time, there's more probable outcomes. More things can happen. So as we push the time out, our max loss is almost 100% of our investment. What can I do with information that says over a 5-year period, I can lose almost 100% of my money? You know, no crap. I can lose that much. In this situation, we can use our positive end of the bell curve right here and rephrase this another way to say over a 5-year period, there is a 95% chance that I can lose a little over $24,000. How will we use this in a risk reward scenario? Well, let's think about this. Let's turn this to positive 1.65. And let's look at our value at risk number. That means over a 5-year period, our value at risk at a 95% confidence level is 24% of our investment. We can be 95% that we have the possibility of losing 24% of our portfolio. So if we set our risk reward parameters to 2 as a baseline, it's always typically 2-to-1 risk to reward. We see that our target reward, if this is our amount we're risking, our target reward over the same 5-year time period is 48%, annualized to an 8.21% return. So to reach our 2-to-1 return target, we need an 8.21% return on average. Well, we see here that our expected return is above that. It's 10%. So in this scenario, if we were willing to risk 24% for a 2-to-1 risk to reward ratio, this investment would be worth it. Let's say we want a 4-to-1. Well, now we see that a 4-to-1 risk to reward, our required annual return increases and it doesn't meet our parameters. So this is a way for us to quantify our risk during a given period. Let's switch this back to 1 and take a look again. What is this saying? This is saying over a 1-year period, there is a less than 1% chance that we're going to lose over $31,000, less than 1% chance. That's our black swan, our left tail event. So what I've done here is I've taken a standard distribution bell curve and I've taken the Z-score probabilities and flipped them sideways to give us a better visual presentation in our minds. On the right side, we have the positive outcomes. On the left side, we have the negative outcomes in the black swan left tail events. So when we're looking at value at risk, we can use this to gauge how much return we need to expect in an investment, and also what is our percentage of loss and what is the percentage that a black swan event happens and we get a max loss in a given period of time. So to recap, let's bring it all the way back home. When we are looking at risk for an alternative investment, alternative investments are illiquid. They are not marked to market, meaning that any given day, we don't know the price. Since we don't know the price, we have to set a level of probabilities to each investment to analyze the risk. To do this, we use the formula value at risk, also known as VAR. VAR gives us what is the worst loss that I could expect in an investment given a period of time and a set of parameters. For alternative investments, we use IRR. We're going to subtract that from our Z-score. Our Z-score is going to be determined by our confidence level, our percent confidence level that we want to determine. Then we're going to multiply this by our standard deviation of the investment multiplied by the square root of the time invested. So now that you understand how to analyze risk using value at risk, make sure you click the link in the description below to subscribe to AltShift. AltShift is a weekly newsletter dedicated to all things alternative investments, where I share insights and resources on how to enhance your portfolio building skills. Also, make sure you download the worksheet in the description below that I use today as a guide on how to calculate value at risk. If you're interested in learning more about alternatives, make sure you visit the video linked above, the best beginner's guide to alternative investments.